Muruso Arano had passed away on the verge of becoming a librarian. Her final prayer was to be surrounded by books in her next life. Arano wakes up as Mine, a sick 5-year-old girl in the medieval capital city of Ehrenfest, and meets her mother, Effa, and her older sister, Tuli. Her mind is bombarded with memories, and she's soon able to understand and recognize them. However, she feels dismayed and concludes that a book would make her happy. She goes around the house searching for a book to read, but to her immense disappointment, there is none. Over the next 3 days, Mine struggles with the oddities of a new peasant lifestyle. One day, Effa heads out to the market with Mine on her back. However, Mine is unable to find books, even in the market. Frail little Mine is sickened by the market and decides to wait with a local merchant while her mother finishes shopping. Surprisingly, she finds a locked book inside the merchant's stall and asks to flip through it, but the merchant denies it. Mine realizes that books are rare and a luxury only afforded by nobility in this world. Adamant, she settles to make the books herself if she has to. Mine ponders where she can get paper to start making books. She also struggles with settling into her new limited life. Using her intellect to adjust, Mine makes shampoo with myrtle fruit oil, leaving hers, Tully, and Afar's hair glossy and pleasant smelling. Later in the day, Mine and Tuli decide to take their father, Gunther's belongings, which he had forgotten. However, Mine is too weak to walk by herself. Luckily, they're approached by 3 little boys, Lutz, Faye, and Ralph. They're neighbors, and are offered help. As Mine rides Ralph's back, she notices him fancying Tuli while herself getting flustered by Lutz. They compliment the girl's pleasant-smelling hair. Upon reaching the southern gates, where Gunther works, the girls are embraced by him, affectionately. Gunther introduces them to Otto, a fellow soldier who, to Mine's surprise, knows how to read and write. He's writing on parchment he made out of animal skin. Happy, she asks Gunther to get her parchment, but is refused. He reasons that it's too expensive. However, Otto is encouraging and promises Mine he will get her a writing slate. As winter approaches, the pork stocking festival begins, but Mine, unable to deal with the festive activities, faints and is taken to the city gate to rest. She wakes up to find Otto with a writing slate. Mine spends her time giddily writing her new name in the new language and the names of the people she's met in her new life, grateful that she can write. It is a harsh winter in Ehrenfest, and Mine tries to separate fibers from the reeds to make faux papyrus for her winter handiwork. However, even with Tuli's help, she fails and gives up. Later, Tuli and Gunther bring porris, a sweet winter fruit. Mine learns that the porre pulp is discarded as bird feed but discovers it is indeed edible. To everyone's amazement, when hungry, Lutz and Ralph come by to exchange food due to a shortage. Mine, with the help of Lutz, makes Peru pancakes. They are loved by everyone unanimously. In the evening, Gunther arrives home to find Mine out of her pencils. She asks Gunther to take her to Otto, but Gunther is jealous of her affection for him. However, the next day, he takes her to Otto in a cloudy mood, warning him to take care of her. As Mine practices writing, she picks out mistakes in Otto's accounting. Impressed, Otto asks for Mine's help, and she agrees to help in exchange for more lessons and an unlimited supply of pencils. To Otto's surprise, she swiftly gets the work done. At home, Mine asks her father to help her build a crochet tool so she can make a flower ornament to go with Tully's baptism outfit. Delighted that she'd ask him for help, he carves one out, and Mine makes the ornament for Tuli. She thanks her for her help. Gunther embraces his daughters, yapping affectionately, and praises them for being good sisters. As spring arrives, Mine continues to impress with her cooking skills and intelligent inventions. She expresses her wish to go to the forest so she can make clay slates to help her make books. However, Gunther tells her to first build her strength. He suggests Mine become Otto's assistant and walk to the city gate, thus little by little building her strength. Mine, delighted, does as she's told. However, this doesn't stop Gunther from being cutely jealous of Otto. Unfortunately, as soon as she can walk, she falls sick and can't make it to the forest until summer. When she's finally permitted to go with the other children, she promises Gunther to rest and not do hard labor. However, Lutz catches her breaking it by digging for clay and scolds her. Grateful for the Peru pancakes, Lutz decides to help Mine dig. With his help, she's finally able to make clay tablets. Mine explains the concept of reading and books to Lutz. Suddenly, Faye and a boy break through and stomp on the clay, making Mine both furious and hurt. The children help her build a second set, but the rain destroys it in the next 3 days. They then work hard on the third set and are successful. Mine wishes to write down all her mother's stories and keep them secure forever on these slates. She takes them to the oven in her home to bake, but these slates explode, putting another one of Mine's ideas to the grave. It is summer in Ehrenfest now, and the day of Tully's baptism has arrived. As Tully goes to her baptism, Gunther and Mine head to the city gate. There, Mine handles an official matter since Otto is busy in the meeting. Poor Gunther can't keep his jealousy and hurries Mine out. How cute. Later, Tuli receives a seamstress kit at the dinner to start as an apprentice seamstress, and Mine gets a knife to help with the woodwork. Conveniently for Mine, she can use the knife to make wooden tablets for her book. The next day, in the forest, Lutz helps Mine with carving tablets and requests a meeting with Otto. Otto has experience with trading, and Lutz dreams of being one. Hence, Mine talks to Otto and sets up an appointment. She also wonders what she can do to write on the tablets and asks Otto for ink, but is denied. Instead, Mine and Lutz mix soot with a clay to make crayons. When Mine returns home with crayons, she discovers Effa has burned her tablets. Overcome with despair, a strange fever overtakes her, and she collapses. She recovers with Lutz's encouragement, but grows curious about her illness. Due to her fever, they missed the meeting, but Otto gladly rescheduled. Mine also opens up about her frustration at her failures, and he recommends she hire someone else or find an investor. Otto lightly teases her that he's curious to meet the person she's so eager to introduce. Mine washes Lutz's hair to make him presentable for the meeting. At the meeting, Otto brings his brother-in-law, a merchant, Benno. Benno immediately notices Mine's unique inventions, shampoo and hair sticks, and asks for details, but Mine intelligently keeps it confidential. Otto then recommends to Lutz that it's foolish to be a merchant since it would mean giving up citizenship. However, Benno asks for their goal. Lutz hesitates, but with Mine's reassurance, says that it's to bring Mine's ideas to reality, and he will sell them as merchandise. They tell them their idea to sell paper made of plants instead of animal skin and decide to develop a prototype next year, the year of their baptism. To start on the paper, Mine needs nails for the equipment. She asks Otto, who agrees in exchange for the shampoo for his wife, Karina. He takes Mine to his home on the wealthy northern side, and Mine washes Karina's hair. Otto is smitten and quickly sends Mine with nails on her way. Later in the woods, Lutz tells Mine about his family's distrust of traders as craftsmen and how it's hard for him to be a merchant. On their way back, Otto gives them an invitation from Benno. It is revealed that Benno is interested in Mine's odd inventions and plans to take them in as apprentices. Mine had also asked Otto if he knew of any illness similar to hers. Benno doubted that it might be the devouring, which means she might die soon. The children meet Benno at Gilberta Company. He complains that Mine should have reached him for the nails in exchange for shampoo instead of Otto, since he will be employing them. Mine apologizes by bowing, which perplexes Benno since it's unusual in medieval culture. He offers tools for developing paper, and Mine expertly negotiates a sale and ownership agreement with him. Benno then calls his assistant Mark, and they sign a magic contract to seal the deal. On their way home, Lutz seems doubtful, seeing Mine talk maturely and questions who she is. Mine is now worried that if Lutz and everyone else found out, they'd detest her. Mine tries to handle work talk without Lutz to avoid his suspicion, but collapses with a fever, at which Benno strictly orders Mine to go home and not to come to the store without Lutz. Later in private, Otto and Benno discuss Mine's illness. Benno explains that the devouring occurs in children, born with mana, magical energy, and cannot be controlled without a magic tool. He worries that it will kill her. Later, Lutz tells Mine that he felt belittled by her ability to talk business and does not hate her, which eases her worry. However, he stops calling her Mine. Benno also orders Lutz to look after Mine and gives them a workspace in the south to start their work. Lutz and Mine have started working on the paper. They go to carpenters, lumberers, etc. to get their equipment made. One day in the forest, while trying different woods for paper, Mine comes across a trombe, a fast-growing vegetation-killing plant. Lutz and the other boys quickly tackle the plant. After they've managed to chop it down, Mine examines the branches and decides to use them as the paper base. And it works. However, Lutz is now quiet around Mine. Lutz notices Mine's unusual knowledge of papermaking and odd inventions, something a girl of her age or this world wouldn't know. Once they have finished the first batch of papers, Lutz confronts Mine again, this time seriously over who she is. Mine finally admits to him that she isn't the real Mine, which enrages Lutz and demands the original Mine be returned. Mine explains that she can give him the old Mine back, but only a corpse would remain. She describes how she doesn't mind giving the old Mine back, since she would have been long gone if it weren't for Lutz's encouragement and support. In the end, Lutz realizes that most of his memories and friendship are with this Mine, not the original one, and he accepts her, strengthening their bond. The children finally present the paper to Benno, who is surprised to learn that it's made of trombe. He passes them, satisfied. After receiving her profits from paper, Mine shows Benno her flower ornament as another tradable merchandise. Benno is taken aback to learn that this is also one of Mine's inventions, and decides to enlist the kids with the guildmaster as temporary merchants. The guildmaster, Gustav, refuses to give away the guild cards to unbaptized children. However, Benno shows him the flower ornament he has been trying to scout for her granddaughter Frida's baptism. Upon seeing this, he agrees and tries to hire Mine, but is firmly refused by Benno. Afterward, the children bring their profits home. Mine's family is delighted. However, Lutz's family is still very much against trading. Soon they meet Frida at Gustav's Audemars Academy. They show her the prototype and examine her baptism dress to design the ornament accordingly. Mine suggests that Frida would need 2 pieces. Lutz smartly helps strike a deal with the second ornament at a discount. Like her grandfather, Frida also tries to recruit Mine but is declined. A month later, Mine and Litz return to deliver their ornaments. As they walk, Mine tells Frida of her illness. To her surprise, Frida also suffers the same, and tells her that it is the devouring. She explains that the fever comes when you lose heart, and that she should try to stay motivated. She adds that it's incurable, and only an abundance of money to afford magic tools can suppress it. It has been 1 year since Mine entered a new world, and her illness is now getting stronger despite Mine's best efforts to keep it contained. As winter approaches, Benno orders the children to improve their attitudes, appearance, and basic writing skills over the winter to become apprentice merchants. He also takes Mine and Lutz to see some trouble in the shampoo making process, and talks to her separately to get further information about the shampoo. Seeing her advanced knowledge, Benno also comes to doubt who she is, yet Mine stays silent on the topic and sells the details at a high price to save money for her illness. At home, Tuli and Effa also ramp up the production of hair ornaments to collect as much money as possible. Seeing the girls at work, Gunther comes in to help, and Mine asks him to take her to the gates the next day. While she's there, Otto and the soldiers rush to combat a trombe. As they leave, she suddenly flares up with a fever. Despite being alright because of the sudden flare, Lutz piggybacks her back home, but breaks down crying on the way, worried for Mine. Later, they meet Benno, and resolve to help Mine raise money to tackle her illness. However, just as they optimistically make plans for spring, she comes down with a very powerful fever and collapses, unable to get back up. Benno yells for the carriage to be brought out. Mine feels her fever absorbed by a source and awakens in Frida's bed with a shattered bracelet. She has been brought over to Gustav's to be healed by Benno. Frida explains to Mine that a bracelet is a magic tool that absorbs her mana. It's like an overflowing cup, and soon she'll need another. However, magic tools are expensive and can be afforded by only nobles. Hence, Frida has already entered into a contract as a noble's mistress when she comes out of age and recommends Mine to do the same. Mine faces the choice to enter into a contract or die surrounded by her loved ones and pays Gustav as he tries to hire her in exchange for a high price for the tool. Mine spends the rest of the day with Frida, recovering and making pound cake, but she misses her family and soon leaves. Mine spends the next few days grateful to her family, Lutz and Benno. She also invites Benno, and they all decide to sell games over the winter to raise money. One evening, as Mine tries on her baptism outfit and spends time with her family, she tells them about her illness, that it's incurable and requires a magic tool, without which she has barely 1 year to live. They're heartbroken but accept Mine's wish to stay with them rather than be sold to a noble. While the girls are asleep at night, Gunther sits by himself, mulling over the news. Mine has decided to perish by her family's side while leaving them a lot of money and stopping work with Benno. She sells the paper-making rights to Benno and takes him to learn the process. Otto comments on how Benno looks like a father with the kids in tow, at which poor Gunther teems with jealousy. Mine also meets Frida, who is surprised to learn about her decision and decides to buy Mine's pound cake recipe, adding to Mine's family savings. Summer comes up and it's the day of Lutz and Mine's baptism. Lutz is flattered when Mine shows up looking all pretty and noble-like. As they enter the church, the folks compliment how they look like a tiny couple. Poor Gunther, he boils once again with jealousy. Inside the church, Mine and Lutz attend the baptism and prayers, where she's astounded to see a book of scriptures with the high priest. As the priest shows the children to pray, Mine falls from being worked up, laughing at the humorous demonstration, and is taken to rest. When she wakes up, Mine roams the hallways trying to find a way back to the prayer hall, but stumbles across a library. Overwhelmed, she asks to be allowed to read, but is told that all the access to the library only lies with the church's staff. At once, Mine decides to be an apprentice priestess and is taken to the high priest. The high priest mistakes Mine to be from a noble family and asks her for a hefty donation to join. He sends her back to come with her parents' permission. However, he allows her to read the scriptures at church. After her baptism, Mine announces her wish to become an apprentice priestess. Unexpectedly, Gunther strongly opposes it, reasoning that orphans who have no one to look after them become priests and priestesses and are brutally burdened by nobles. Mine is heartbroken that her only access to books is being denied. However, she values her family over everything else and agrees. When Mine visits the church the next day, she meets the head priest, Ferdinand, and informs the high priest of her illness and her parents' decision. Hearing this, they bring out a grail and ask Mine to touch it. The grail glows as Mine touches it, and the priests invite her parents to discuss the situation again. Mine worries if she's made matters more complicated. Later, Mine and Lutz tell Benno about the situation. Benno angrily scolds Mine and explains that the church is suffering from a lack of mana due to the shortage of nobles, and sees Mine's illness and overflowing mana as valuable. He warns her not to be played at the nobles' hands. With careful negotiation, Mine can be safe and access the magic tools at church to control her illness. Mine wonders why Benno is so concerned. Mark clears that Benno has grown to love the children and considers Mine a daughter. A blushing Benno profusely denies it. To safeguard Mine, they sign sales rights to Lutz. Benno also registered their workplace as Mine's studio with the guild. Now Mine will be able to reach Lutz in an emergency. On their way back, Lutz complains that Mine promised to work with him, overwhelmed with the emotion and worry. Mine reassures him that even if she joins the church, she'll always be there. Mine tells her parents about the invitation and Benno's strong suggestion to safeguard Mine by negotiating 3 demands in exchange for Mine's mana and money. To acknowledge Mine's frailty and hence guarantee extra care by making her a blue-robed priestess and not a gray one, to allow her to run her studio, and to remain with her family. Gunther agrees and they decide to meet the priests, but Tully worries about her family's security since nobles can be stone-hearted and hurt commoners over trivial matters. The next day, Effa, Gunther, and Mine reach the church. As soon as the high priest realizes that Mine is not of a noble family, he tries to take Mine forcefully. He orders the staff to lock the parents up and refuses their demands completely. Gunther, being a protective father, fights back. However, seeing the chaos, Mine is overcome by her strong mana. Her mana spreads over the high priest and starts choking him. Quickly, Ferdinand intervenes and calms her down. As the high priest is carried out, Ferdinand takes the family to his office and accepts their demands. He asks to join the church as a request, not an order, to which Mine gladly agrees. Ferdinand says she's lucky to have such caring parents compared to the children of the church. Back home, Tully and Lutz nervously wait for Mine, Gunther, and Effa's return. Upon seeing them, they're delighted and relieved. Mine is back home and safe with a possible healthy future ahead of her. With the drama that unfolded before the high priest, Mine, in the end, had convinced the head priest Ferdinand to accept all her terms and conditions for joining the temple. She's excited to start as an apprenticeship priestess. However, due to preparations, there's still time. Unlike her, Luke has already started his merchant apprenticeship and is working hard. Mine tells Benno of all the conditions accepted, and it seems even Benno regards Ferdinand as someone reliable she can go to. Though Mine has landed her beloved apprentice job, she keeps it a secret from most of her peers besides her family, Luke and Benno. While talking to Lutz's mother, she learns she might be spied on. The spy seems diligent, even eavesdropping on Gunther and Otto talking about Mine and breaking into the merchant guild. Meanwhile, as mentioned in Mine's terms, she requires retainers to take care of her as she's quite ill. While talking to the high priest, Ferdinand informs him of assigning his retainers to Mine. But Fatty still seems to be ripe in a fury from when Mine had busted him and spitefully decides to place one of his retainers instead of Ferdinand's. Soon Mine arrives, finally able to be an apprentice priestess, but she's disturbed upon receiving sharp gazes. Mine takes an oath as a blue-robed priestess and meets her 3 troublesome retainers: Gil, the ultimate troublemaker, Delia, an aspirant to be Ferdinand's concubine, and the cold Fran. Yikes, this is not going to be fun. Starting as an apprentice priestess, Mine is briefed on her duties in Ferdinand's office and shown how to give her mana away. Soon she's given access to the library and hops away happily. But unlucky her, she's now followed by the ear-eating 3 retainers. While reading, Gil constantly disturbs her by throwing a tantrum to eat. This makes her angry, spilling mana. The 3 seem to only have one of 2 motives: to report on her doings to the curious high priest or annoy her. Tired of them, Mine arrives at Benno's and is immediately scolded for openly walking in her blue robe, indicating nobility and risking kidnapping. He's a proper angry father. But there's more to drop as Mine informs him of the donation she has to make to the temple as decided, making him and Mark skedaddle. The three arrive at the cathedral, where the donation is made, all while Benno, with his fatherly love, interrupts Fran and Ferdinand to be gentler with Mine. Settling Mine's profit donation, Benno prepares to leave when Mine suddenly collapses. Immediately he picks her up and starts leaving, angered. Ashamed, Fran rushes, apologizing for not being a good retainer to his master, and asking Benno to carry Mine. Mr. Benno is quite a possessive guardian though, as Mine assures Fran he allows him to carry her. It seems one of her retainers is warming up to her. Meanwhile, Delia gets the High Priest's favors for reporting to him, and poor Gil's banished from the orphanage, and food, as he has a master now. The frustrations of Gil soon drop on Mine as he already gets in a scuffle complaining about his unmet basic needs despite Mine being his master. It makes her realize her shortcoming and apologizes, promising to take responsibility. Later, Mine gets ready for work in Ferdinand's office, changing right there since she got an earful from Benno. But that flashes poor Ferdinand, this scandalous priest. To avoid further scandalization, he gives her an empty office, making Mine assign Gil his first task to clean it in exchange for his needs. When done with the task, Mine's pleased and pats Gil on the head, moving him to tears. Soon proving Fran and Gil to be with common clothes, Mine brings them about the city, exposing them to a different atmosphere than the cathedral. Even Gil's now warming up to her. Meeting Benno, she also makes him happy, informing him of the office and an oven in it, something Benno had lacked in training his chefs. Immediately, they start testing food, which comes out delicious. Just as they relish the pizza, Delia bursts in, yelling at Mine for having her thrown out of High Priest favors as Gil and Fran, now loyal to her, defend her. The priest was enraged upon hearing Mine had got into the office and threw Delia out for not reporting him in time. Seeing that all her tactics, including trying to flirt with Benno, are failing, Delia starts crying. However, Mine doesn't abandon her and gives her the task of dressing her in exchange for supporting her. One more comrade down. One day, Mine and the bunch have some leftover bread, which she allows Gil to take to the children at the orphanage. There, to her horror, she finds the orphanage door locked as if in prison. And inside, little children collapsed, starving and miserable in the darkness. The sight's too heavy for Mine to take, and she faints just as Gil locks the door again. Mine is deeply concerned for the children. Ever since the church dismissed the orphanage's priestess, the children have been abandoned completely. Despite Fran warning her to stay out of the matter, Mine talks to Ferdinand, who sends her back unsupportive. It makes her feel worse at her helplessness and having inadequate capital to save the children. After work, she meets Lutz, who questions her mood. Little Lutz has sharpened through his apprenticeship and comes up with a brilliant plan. They could hire the children for work, turning the orphanage into a branch of their paper-making studio. Mine will be the one to help them in the form of returns, and that's pretty marvelous. However, when Mine goes to talk to Ferdinand, she gets scolded on her still poor, noble decorum instead. Surprisingly, just as she thinks all is lost, Ferdinand appoints her as the orphanage's director. Mine also comes to know that Ferdinand is an outsider priest just like her, and not rose by the church. Nevertheless, Mine can now save the kids and happily bursts into the orphanage, letting light in and announcing freedom. As Mine becomes the director, the orphanage speedily starts revolutionizing itself. Under Fran's direction, the children move to work, and Mine informs them of the work return rule, bringing them fresh food for their hard work. Even Thule and Gunther help, taking the kids outside to collect paper raw materials for a flashcard idea Mine has come up with. Of course, who else but Benno purchases the rights to it. To the kids, Mine soon becomes beloved, almost a messiah, transforming their fate. With the Star Festival coming up, Mine wishes for the orphans to have just as good a time as others and requests Ferdinand to allow it. He allows, as long as there's no nuisance. The day of the festival arrives and the children yap happily, throwing fruit at each other when Mine suddenly triggers a trombe to sprout. In time, Gil and Lutz chomp it off and the children resume their happy clamor. Despite covering it up, Mine is confronted when she meets Ferdinand again. Complaining about the mess the kids made at the trombe, he puts Mine in detention as Fran protests. Ferdinand disregards Fran's protest, but soon realizes he's concerned for Mine's health. The detention doesn't go well on Mine, who collapses all sickly and weak, making Ferdinand regret taking her health so lightly. About time someone's realizing, bumhead. While Mine is beginning to christen as an apprentice priestess, Luke encounters problems at home. His family's unsupportive stance of him being a merchant has caused fights, and Lutz runs away from home, deciding to live in Benno's attic. Mine's still recovering from her detention when Ralph, Lutz's brother, comes to ask where he might be. He finds him at Benno's and creates chaos. Over the days, even Lutz's mother comes to call him, yet he refuses. Once Mine's well, she visits Benno about the situation. It turns out Benno fully supports Lutz's dreams, declaring that he'll adopt him as a child for him to stay. Well, buddy, now trying to take baby Lutz as well. It's pretty adorable. The situation disturbs Mine greatly, causing her to relay the information to Ferdinand. Soon, all parties involved are called to the cathedral by him to sign Lutz's adoption. Yet, when his parents arrive, they seem gloomy and reveal they'd been supportive of Lutz's work. All they wished was for him to be safe, and that's why they'd avoid him going away as a merchant. Seeing their emotions, Benno decides to swap the idea and raise Lutz as his successor since he has no child. It helps the family stay from wrecking, moving everyone to tears. Relieved, Mine grows tearful and is offered a handkerchief by the head priest. On the embroidery of it, Mine finally learns his name. Staunch priest is warming up to her as well. No one can escape Mine's cuteness. Gladly, the situation with Lutz's family is settled, but there's news at Mine's. Effa, Mine's mother, is expecting. Delighted at the news, Mine immediately decides to make a picture book for her soon-to-come sibling, and reaches Ferdinand on the matter. Excitedly, she asks for Wilma from the orphanage to become her retainer, as she's good at art, but Ferdinand once again finds her aspirations careless. He insists that if she's to take an art retainer, she will take a music retainer too, which shall teach her noble music skills to prepare her for the future. With her abundance of mana, once Mine comes of age, she'll be hunted for by prestigious nobles hoping for a child that also holds abundant mana. You could say that they're mana diggers. Mine's also got to be careful about the High Priest, who's still spiteful and may make a move hearing of the baby. Soon, Mine starts her lessons on the Hara spell with Ferdinand and quickly picks it up. However, it becomes clear to Mine that her musical retainer, Rosina, is considering herself above Gil, Fran, and Delia. All the while, Wilma refuses to leave the orphanage as Mine's art retainer. Instead of dismissing them though, Mine listens to all her retainers and gives Rosina an ultimatum of either working or returning to the orphanage. Rosina accepts to work. Soon, with her help, Mine passes her musical tests, but Wilma still won't come out. Rosina tells her that out of all the people in the orphanage, Wilma was taken advantage of by a blue-robed priest and therefore stays within the orphanage, traumatized by men. Now that nobly duties are off the to-do list, Mine can finally think of her picture book again. Mine decides to make a picture book version of the Book of the Holy Scriptures from the church. Hearing of this, Ferdinand allows the picture book to be started. However, Wilma still stays in. Still, Mine takes care of her fear and comes with Rosina to talk to her rather than Fran. Mine tells of her plans to Benno, saying she plans to use wooden blocks for block printing pictures in the picture book. However, she missed out on the cost calculation for ink that would be used, which is quite costly. Of course, her daddy Benno gives her a good scolding. Nevertheless, Mine's unstoppable and resorts to making her own ink with soot and oil. All the while, though, Wilma assists with her art. She also struggles with her fear greatly, and has even caused her to lash out at the kids. Mine also checks with Ferdinand on the content of the book. He's blown away by how clearly she's able to translate the complex prose to child-friendly prose, and questions her. She only relays that she saw it in dreams. Soon, even Wilma finds the guts to see the process in the studio. After 2 years of hard work and combining Mine's ideas and other support and handiwork, Mine's made her very first book, a picture book, and it moves her to tears. Creating a picture book may have been huge for the world Mine was born into, but to Mine, there are far greater things than just creating a book. For example, a library organization. Yep, Mine's a full-on geek, but an adorable one at that. While on her way to the library, Mine runs into a gray-robed priest under the High Priest. She avoids him to evade conflict, but once she reaches the library, her calm demeanor completely collapses at sight. The library lay tattered with books all over. It rages Mine greatly. However, before the little ball can blow up, Fran quickly grabs her, taking her to Ferdinand. With cheeks blown up in anger, Mine starts babbling about bringing a blood carnival for her destroyed library. Ferdinand takes her aside and informs her that this might be the doing of the High Priest's loyal men to keep her from the harvest. With the harvest festival upon them, blue-robed priests are offered harvest from farmers as an offering to God. It's possible they wanted to prevent her from receiving any. Seeing how it is, Mine decides to settle the library herself. Immediately, she brings her retainers and starts sorting the books with the Nippon Decimal Classification System. Meanwhile, Mine's bookmaking is in full bloom. She printed her first children's Bible. Though Benno asks for the rights immediately, Mine refrains. She shows it to Ferdinand, who realizes what a blow to society this can make, and suspects Mine will be in danger if things remain as she wills. Ferdinand also blows away Mine's plans to stay at home and create books during winter as they need her mana for the upcoming dedication ceremony. The news of Mine staying at the cathedral instead of spending time at home highly distresses Mine, but it distresses the possessive, loving father, Gunther, even more. Over the table, he shows his dismay, yet Mine reminds her family that the reason she's alive and healthy is because of her acceptance at the church. Hence, she should take responsibility. Finally, her family understands. Poor Gunther's gonna miss his little girl. Aww. Before the ceremony, Mine plans to start on more picture books at the cathedral. However, the plan's blown away again. Fran comes in informing Mine that the church needs her to perform a ritual for the Knight's Order due to the shortage of priests. Unknown to them, it's gonna come way before than anticipated. Just as Ferdinand returns from the Harvest Festival, a magic bird visits him, delivering the message of an urgent Knight's Order ritual to be performed since they are to depart and tackle a strong erupting trombe. Mine is hurriedly dressed, and Fran carries her outwards towards the noble gates. There she's surprised to see Ferdinand dressed in armor. He will fight alongside the knights. Entering the gates, it's a whole different world of nobles. Rows of knights stand as the commander steps, kneeling to Ferdinand. Mine baffles when Ferdinand summons magical flying creatures to depart. Just as they ignite in the clash, Mine kneels, performing her duty by praying over them and giving them blessings. However, as Ferdinand and the knights head to Trombe, a soldier, Shikikozoa, mocks Mine's prayers. The hate for Mine becoming a blue-robed priestess seems to have finally come for her neck. Shikikozoa, an entitled noble knight, berates little Mine, but a lower-ranked knight, Damuel, tries to encourage her. From below, Mine watches the knights clash with the Trombe as Damuel and she admires Ferdinand's skill in using magical arms. However, just as Damuel and Mine friendly chat, Shikikozoa butts in again, reprimanding Damuel for talking to a kami. Samuel is surprised at the knowledge, but still tries standing up for Mine. However, he's of a lower rank and sets aside once Shikikozoa acts authoritative. Rudely, Shikikozoa even punches Fran and grabs Mine by the hair, throwing her down and bringing out his knife to gouge her eyes out. What a jerk. Like, seriously, she's just a child. Dangerously, the scuffle causes a trombe to sprout out and start choking poor Mine, at which jerk-ass Shikikozoa runs away and Mine calls out for Lutz. Far in the city, Lutz has a vision of her. Luckily, Ferdinand comes in time, scolding the two knights and saving the poor girl. For their poor conduct, an open interrogation is conducted, where Shikikozoa is still acting entitled and reasons that a noble isn't to give justification on what he did to a commoner. Being the highest of the ranks, Ferdinand issues a verdict. He gives Shikikozoa a good scolding, putting him back in his place, and announcing punishment for all knights. Soon, Ferdinand carries Mine back to the skies, promising he will set her for success. As punishment, Ferdinand asks jerk-ass Shikikozoa to perform the knightly order prayer. Let's see how much that big mouth got him, huh? However, just as he starts, the mana in him drains, and he collapses. Sharply, Ferdinand yanks him away and hands Mine to complete the rest. As she starts, a massive gust of wind blows, replenishing the ground's mana, which the trombe had sucked. It blows out the soldiers' minds as well as Ferdinand's. For reprimands, Mine asks for no more than being kind to the nice knight Damuel and a new robe set. Ferdinand feels bad for not being able to protect her. Soon, Ferdinand calls Mine to his room and makes her lie down. We're taken to the scene from the first season's episode, where he places a circlet on Mine and enters her memories. Curious about her odd futuristic mind and crazy inventions, Ferdinand synchronizes with Mine's past life, where she gives him a tour of the life in Urano, books and libraries. Seeing her old memories, Mine grows quite distressed, calling out her past mother and feeling bad for the tough relations. Ferdinand immediately pulls her out. Upon waking up, she gives Ferdinand an unexpected hug. Aw. Ferdinand has decided that Mine is of great value to Ernsfest if utilized properly, and asks Kardest, the Knight Commander, to adopt her to guarantee her protection. Having dinner with her family, Mine thanks Effa as a way to thank her past mother and feels grateful for her small family. Soon, Mine's back to hearing Benno's scolding, doing her priestess duties, and making more books with the orphans. The rustling autumn comes in, and with the oncoming winter, Mine has to stay at the cathedral during the harsh frost instead of making it home every day. Her printing work is bustling with copies sliding out, but she would need supplies to prepare for her stay at the church. After she gets scolded by Benno for not giving it importance, she ends up selling some of the books to him for cash. After all, he's a clever businessman. Nevertheless, her book soon caught the attention of the Ink Guild master. He notices the ink on her paper once the books circulate in the wealthy nobles. He's enraged at the prospect of someone else taking his business category. However, Benno assigns the ink rights over to him to avoid conflict. He makes sure not to have her present there for her safety. Meanwhile, Mine's fitted for her new priestess dress by Corina, who's now considerably pregnant, with Otto always jumping at his toes. Benno and Mine are also intercepted by a blacksmith, Jonathan, asking her to become his patron since nobody likes his detail-picky stuff. It immediately tickles the Mine brains, as she asks him for metal printing in exchange for becoming his patron. Though all seems well, the prying Ink Guild master isn't satisfied and goes as far as to harass Luke to get information about Mine. Immediately, Benno suggests Mine seclude at the cathedral early for her own safety, making her leave her family earlier than expected. And that sucks. Upon Fran's suggestion, they keep the circumstances of her early seclusion secret from Delia, who's still closely associated with the High Priest. Mine begins her sad days alone in the cathedral, while Gunther is determined to keep this girl safe. Mine isn't a girl who stays idle for long. Just a day passed at the cathedral and she's already on to new activities. Bran is shocked when he finds her teaching Delia arithmetic. She happily reveals that she's planning on educating the children at the orphanage by teaching them to read and write. Soon Lutz comes to visit her, and she longingly rushes down to hug him. Poor girl wishes to be hugged too. Adorable. Tuli comes to visit her, but her departure only leaves little Mine more homesick. Poor girl. Not long before, Benno arrives with Mark bringing along her priestess dress. The Knightly Order's commander, Karstedt, has also come. However, with his usual fatherly scold, Benno tells Mine to not be a simpleton since it's clear they've summoned him for more than just delivering a dress. Soon in a serious meeting, Karstedt, Ferdinand, Benno, and Daniel converse. They talk about the looming danger from the Ink Guild master, Wolf, who seems to have dangerous connections and is a genuine threat. They assign Daniel as Mine's bodyguard. Ferdinand grabs the chance and reveals his suggestion to have Karstedt adopt Mine for her safety, but the sound of it immediately fires Mine up. Mana floods out as Ferdinand quickly uses a magic tool to drain it, carrying her hurriedly to his office. Mine continues to freak out and be overwhelmed with Mana at the thought of being separated from her family, making Ferdinand hug her. Affectionately, she climbs into his lap to feel better, and he makes her understand her circumstance. In the end, he tells her to have her family spoil her as much as she wants till the age of 10, after which Ferdinand will no longer listen to her wails and protests. Mine is happy with the decision for now. Daniel flies to the cathedral, starting duty as Mine's personal bodyguard. He's introduced to everyone, including Lutz and Tuli, who are now coming by to learn to read and write together with the orphans. Daniel feels quite loved, considering the higher nobles often treat him harshly. Behind her back, though, Delia continues to report developments in Mine's life to the High Priest. The dedication prayer ceremony soon arrives, and Mine is taken to the prayer room with the grails that she fills with Mana together with Ferdinand. However, during one of their prayers, the High Priest comes in, tumbling more grails upon her to fill. She has no choice but to oblige, and that Patty is such a snob. Soon with Daniel, she makes her way to Johann, who finally presents her with the metal printing blocks. Escalated over the roofs, she jumps, announcing he's Johannes Gutenberg, the very person who brought the revelation by inventing the printing press. Her excitement takes over so much that the poor girl collapses due to her sickly health. Well, at least she's happy. But all is not good. Once the snow melts, Mine asks Ferdinand to allow her to go home, but he has worse news. It seems that matters are more complicated. Wolf has now died, and there seems to be a bigger person of noble heritage after her. He soon calls her parents, telling them the situation. Seeing the circumstances, Effa and Gunther allow Mine to stay in the cathedral for the spring, while also agreeing, sadly, to her adoption by the age of 10. Nevertheless, spring soon arrives, and as Mine and Ferdinand prepare for the spring prayer, a quite troublesome, yet cool, blue-robed priest comes into Mine's life. Sylvester. Sylvester is like an annoying big brother who immediately jumps to treating Mine like a plushie, driving her so annoyed that she gets overwhelmed with mana. That earns him a knock from both Karstedt and Ferdinand. Soon they board the magical beasts, flying over to different farmer districts. Of course, Sylvester lands in all glory, showing off his cool moves, and this guy's pretty interesting. Mine executes the prayer well, filling the grail with her mana and providing the farmers as the priests bless them. Once the sun sets, they come to their resting place. Mine dresses up quite nicely, making even Karstedt compliment her that she looks quite noble. Soon the diners are served, but Mine's chefs have prepared it separately for her. Of course, seeing her elite food, the naughty Sylvester starts drooling and asks Mine for her chefs by the end of dinner. Cleverly, Mine says that she can't sell them over, and if he wishes for good food, he can become a patron for the restaurant they plan to open. Genius. With that night ending, they entertain themselves before resuming their travel. They stop by a noble, Viscount Gerlach, who seems quite doubtful to Ferdinand. He immediately asks Mine to stay hidden behind a robe. However, that night, as they stay in Kernstadt's mother's house, two bandits break into the estate, attempting to kidnap Mine. Luckily, they're caught, but end their own lives to evade trouble. But that's not the only trouble coming their way. On their way back from the spring prayers, Fran and Rosina's carriage also gets attacked by foreign farmers and strange mana. Though Karstedt and Sylvester manage to handle the situation, their magic wipes everything due to Mine's blessing, leaving them with no clues. As Mine lies in recovery, Ferdinand worries that there's a foreign noble involved in the drama. Ferdinand suspects there are devouring soldiers involved. For now, they return to the cathedral, where Rosina and Frank thank Mine for prioritizing their lives during the attack. She had insisted on their safety. Mine enters the cathedral, relieved that she's back, only to see their next problem. Sylvester. Of course now he's around. He insists on having a tour of the cathedral, the orphanage she's revolutionized, and her printing workshop. Ferdinand makes sure to accompany her so he doesn't annoy her too much. Nevertheless, she takes Sylvester about the orphanage, showing him all the card games she's come up with, and then to the printing shop. She shows around the new printing methods, while Ferdinand quietly teems with a mountain of questions. Soon Sylvester is introduced to the ever-fatherly merchant, Benno, but his demeanor makes a man like Benno start praying to the gods. Sylvester talks with Benno regarding the chefs and restaurant, which leaves him quite worried and pinching Mine's cheeks for getting him in so much trouble. By the end of the day, as Sylvester leaves, he gifts Mine a protection charm and asks her to summon him in time for help. See? He's a big bro, and just as annoying as one too. Soon, Mine sits with Ferdinand for the interrogation. He warns that making books houses many nobles' jobs, and her printing invention might cause trouble, since it will take their work. She should wait until she's adopted by Karstedt to evade any harm. He's also kind enough to let her family visit her home, where a heavily pregnant Effa waits for the baby to arrive. The time soon comes, and Effa gives birth to a baby boy named Camille, making Mine a big sis. However, Delia is still snitching to the high priest about her life, and it seems a doubtful noble will soon visit. In a suspicious meeting, the high priest sits with three nobles: Viscountess Deldov, Viscount Gerol, and Count Bindwald of a neighboring country, Arensbach. They discuss the failed attempt to kidnap Mine and put a strange ball before the priest, insisting him to help him get rid of Mine from his life and to sell to them. So the snobby fatty has been involved in all of this. Ferdinand was right about the foreign involvement. Unbeknownst to all the trouble boiling behind her back, Mine couldn't care any less. She's overcome by her little bro Camille and a craze to make picture books for him, even blabbering to Benno, who's already fed up with Otto and Karina welcoming their baby girl, Renette. Entering the cathedral, she's presented with another abandoned baby left to them. Mine does her best, feeding him goat milk and assigning turns to her attendants to take care of him, including Delia, who she hopes will forget about her concubine dreams if she's occupied raising a little bro. Mine names the boy Dirk and welcomes him to the family. Soon on a trip back home, Mine is introduced to Bierce and his daughter Haiti, the new Ink Guild master since Wolf is now dead. However, they ask Mine for assistance since the work is hard for them. Mine soon unfolds her wish to create colored ink, making Haiti jump out of her chair. It looks like we have another Mine now. Haiti's passionate about making colored inks and starts chatting with Mine until Benno and Bierce have to control the girls. Soon in the ink workshop, they mix oils and pigments to make new colors, and Haiti's excitement is over the roof. Mine finds her unique, like her. Back at the cathedral, as Dirk wails, Delia brings him some milk only to see that he's spotted and burning up. Delia soon informs Mine of Dirk's condition. However, the spots in the burning have vanished, leaving none to be witnessed by Mine. But once he starts crying again, the spots return, and Mine can feel him burning. His burn reminds her of her own mana burning. She doubts he has the devouring as well. For now, Mine stays quiet, asking for an urgent meeting with the head priest and calling Lutz. Once Lutz comes, he asks him to bring her the Tau fruit, a fruit that suppresses mana. Soon, she meets Ferdinand, revealing her concerns. It shocks him, and he agrees to come by and measure Dirk's mana later. However, there's a problem. If Dirk indeed has the devouring, the situation's complex, and he needs to be given off to a noble for survival. But Mine's worried that he'll be treated ill. Soon, Ferdinand comes by to check Dirk's mana level and estimates it's moderate. He indeed has the devouring. It saddens Mine, however she cheers up once Ferdinand points out that she can make a contract with him once she becomes a noble when adopted by Kerstedt. For now, they must keep this a secret, especially since the High Priest is already out to get her. Mine's ink development seem to be going well too. They've made rich pigments with Haiti, but come at a block in development once they start turning black upon being mixed. Effa tells her of fixing agents to prevent the blackening, and Lutz and Gil soon get to it. Meanwhile, Dahlia seems to be getting closer and closer to Dirk, growing worried when he's away from her. She struggles to go to the orphanage due to her past and worries the same for Dirk. Mine returns to her, throwing a fit over learning of Dirk's adoption by nobles. Erupting in anger, Dahlia jumps onto Mine. Calmly, Mine explains to her that it's highly unlikely, and she had asked Ferdinand for the better of Dirk. Yet for now, he can be with Dahlia. At this, Dahlia calms down. Soon, Mine returns to her busy being. Benno's Italian restaurant opens, and I just realized how Italian of a name Benno is, while Miss Haiti, in her obsession, tries to infiltrate a painter's workshop to crack the colored ink recipe. However, with Lutz and Gil completing the fixing agent, the development block is soon overcome. Afterward, Mine visits Joan and orders a stylus for Gil and a toy for little Camille. A red signal goes up as they exit, indicating an emergency at the gates. Immediately, Daniel escorts Mine to her home's safety. At dinner, Gunther explains that a noble illegally tried to enter the city, making them signal to summon the knights. He's determined to keep Mine safe from any freaky nobles. Somewhere in the cathedral, the High Priest loses his composure. The fatty is bursting. Soon, Ferdinand sends the details to Gunther. He has suspected that the High Priest is involved since the suspicious noble at the gates was summoned by him. Once Mine returns to the cathedral, they're met with the horrific news that Dirk has been given for adoption by the High Priest. It seems that Dahlia had taken the matter to him. Immediately, Mine dismisses Dahlia as her attendant and is saddened that Dirk's out of her hands now. Fran also warns her about the High Priest's mischievousness. With Mine in more danger, Thule and Lutz start coming to escort her home together with Daniel. They reach the gates and meet Otto, who tells them of the same suspicious noble entering the city. Gunther is in search of him. Immediately, Daniel sends off a signal, but before he can realize, someone snatches Thule and Mine from behind. The two men snatch the girls away in a bag and are chased by Otto and Daniel, who rush to save the girls. In time, Gunther hears the chaos, catching up to the kidnappers and yanking Mine out. However, one of them places a knife at Thule's throat. Immediately, Mine burns in mana, making the man collapse. And while Daniel handles the situation, Gunther and Otto carry the two girls to safety. However, before they leave, Mine remembers the gift given to her by Sylvester and uses it to call for help. Thule is rushed to Benno for safety while Mine is taken to the cathedral by Gunther and Daniel. Once they arrive, Mine is told of Ferdinand's absence and the arrival of a suspicious noble who's right now adopting Dirk. Giving Mine a ring, Daniel, Gunther, and Fran try to escort Mine to safety only to run into the High Priest, Dahlia holding Dirk and the noble, Count Bindwald. Dahlia announces to Mine that Dirk's been adopted, when Bindwald reveals that it's not adoption but a devouring servitude in exchange for Mine. It leaves Dahlia baffled as she realizes she's been played. Snitcher got a taste of her own medicine. Immediately, Bindwald and the High Priest's men attack Gunther and Mine. The High Priest even goes as far as to use little Dirk's mana to attack her, leaving the baby unconscious. Mine is suddenly grabbed and almost forced to sign the contract when Gunther pushes her aside. She loathes Sylvester for not coming in time. Suddenly, a door bursts open, and out comes Ferdinand, and he had been there the whole time. He restricts the High Priest immediately, and seeing Sylvester's gift around Mine, tells her its importance. Ferdinand then faces Bindwald as Mine creates a shield, praying and protecting Gunther, Daniel, and Fran. As Ferdinand fights the crazy Count Bindwald, Sylvester finally arrives, telling Ferdinand to stop. Immediately, everyone stops and bows down to him as his attendant introduces him as Ob Ehrenfest. Wait. He's the Lord Ehrenfest of the Kingdom of Ehrenfest. Mine is taken aback. With everyone bowing down to him, Bindwald and the High Priest start asking him to punish Mine. However, Sylvester clears that the gift given to Mine is actually an emergency adoption contract. Using it means she's Sylvester's daughter immediately. Therefore, they've attacked a lord's daughter. He announces Bindwald as a criminal for attacking Mine and illegally entering the city of Ehrenfest. The High Priest tries to convince Sylvester of his innocence by calling Ferdinand names. It turns out Ferdinand is Sylvester's half-brother, and Sylvester immediately gives him a death sentence. Mine, though, manages to get Delia a lower punishment. Sylvester and Ferdinand then sit with Gunther, explaining the immediate adoption situation and asking him to bring his family instantly for the contract to be signed. Gunther rushes home, fetching them, leaving Lutz worried. As the family arrives, they're sat down for the process. Ferdinand and Sylvester explain they'd pose as if Mine was Kerstedt's dead third wife's daughter, and is now being adopted by Lord Ehrenfest, Sylvester. However, the adoption from him means Mine will no longer be able to meet her family. She reads the dreaded terms painfully, entailing how they shall act as if they don't know her from here on, and treat her as a noble. In tears for her safety, the family signs the contract, giving their heartfelt goodbyes. Mine raises her hands, blessing her family for protection for the last time. A great blessing that heals all those who are present, injured, or ill in the cathedral as she casts it. Mine now starts her life as Sylvester's daughter, Rosemine. And not only that, she's also the head of book printing for Ehrenfest now. And that's the end of the video.
Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.